Howdy, folks, and welcome to the grand finale of the Camera Shake podcast for 2024. Can you believe it? Another year in the books, packed with incredible conversations, inspiring stories, and photography wisdom from some of the most talented creatives out there. But before we dive into the best of 2024, my personal highlight reel of the year, let me take a moment to say a massive thank you to you, our amazing audience. Whether you've been tuning in every week, binge watching episodes on YouTube, dropping comments on social media, or supporting us on buymeacoffee.com, you've been the fuel that keeps this podcast engine running. Your messages, feedback, and shared stories remind me why I started the show in the first place, to build a community of photographers who are passionate, curious, and always ready to learn something new. And let's not forget our phenomenal guests. From seasoned pros to fresh new voices, every guest brought their A-game, sharing insights, laughter, and sometimes even a few vulnerable moments. I've learned so much from these conversations, and I hope you have too. Now, here's the deal. Today, we're rolling out my top 10 favorite moments of 2024. And let me tell you, narrowing it down to just 10, that was like, trying to choose between an 85mm lens for portraits or a 70-200 and all these kind of things. So, every episode brought something special. But these moments are ones I'll remember for a long time. But hey, I want to hear from you. Which episode stuck with you the most this year? Which guest dropped that golden nugget of wisdom you'll carry into your next shoot? Hit me up in the comments on YouTube, slide into my DMs on Instagram, or join the conversation on our Facebook group. Now, before we jump in, let's take a quick look back at some of the milestones we've hit this year, because 2024 has been a wild ride. New collaborations, exciting opportunities, and a whole lot of photography goodness packed into 52 episodes. So grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let's relive the best of 2024. Thank you for being part of this journey, for your support, your passion, and your time. All right, let's hit play on the highlights and roll that tape. Now, 2024 was a year packed with incredible collaborations, and one of my favorite things is hitting the road to record episodes on location. This year, I had the pleasure of visiting an old friend of the show, none other than the UK's top headshot and portrait photographer, Ivan Weiss. We met up at his brand new studio in central London to chat about his creative process and the secrets behind his unmistakably striking imagery. Here's a glimpse into that conversation.
As a headshot photographer, how important is location in that respect?
I think generally speaking, as long as you have access to about 200 people a year, you can run a business. I've got about 10 million people within a 40-minute radius of here, maybe an hour radius of here, which is a lot. It's more than I need, but I've also got, probably 15 to 20 photographers within arm's reach, Yeah. If I was living in a small village in the middle of nowhere, I probably wouldn't have so much competition, and therefore it would be easier to reach the people. I think it balances out, the market for photography is it's sort of self-regulating. People who can't make a living because there's not enough demand for the type of work that they want to do, stop doing it.
And it's possibly also, it's often a question of specialization.
Mm-hmm.
Like you probably, if you're within a larger urban area, it's probably easier to specialize, niche down than it would be if you're out in the countryside somewhere.
Yes and no. I think it depends on how you market yourself. There are certainly photographers who have their base in the middle of nowhere, and part of the experience is that people travel to them, maybe, stay overnight. It's a sort of residential weekend thing that you go and have your portrait taken. That doesn't really suit how I work, how I want to live my life. So that's not for me, but I think there are ways to make those things work no matter where you are. I mean, what I'm saying is, I was born and grew up in London. That's why I'm based in London. I don't think you have to be in London to be successful as a photographer. It's certainly true that for commercial photography, London is one of the important centres in the world, but I'm not in commercial photography. I happen to be in London because I was born here.
Your clients are predominantly actors and corporates?
I have a lot of actors. I have a lot of people in creative industries in general, so architects, designers, people around those kind of industries and adjacent to those industries. But really, I think most people appreciate that in 2024, having a good photograph of yourself is a useful thing to all kinds of people. And therefore, that opens up a wide potential market for me. Within that, it's people who like my aesthetic. There are definitely people who don't care about the aesthetic and they just want a picture. And photo booths still exist, Snappy Snap still exists. Your passport picture is a passport picture. There is a market for that, and that market is catered to by different photographers and different companies. But yeah, I get people working in all kinds of fields really, but the common thread is that there are people who have some kind of appreciation of art and aesthetics.
The Photography and Video Show is hands down one of my favorite events every single year. As the biggest trade show of its kind in Europe, it is an unbeatable opportunity for learning, checking out the latest gear, and connecting with people who share the same passion for photography. Let's face it, photography can be a pretty solitary pursuit, and being surrounded by thousands of like-minded creatives is always an energizing experience. Here's a snapshot from this year's show.
I'm here with Peter Treadway, as ever, one of the main organizers of a lot of the stages. How's it been going this year?
It's been a really, really good show this year. So I'm one of the stage managers for the live stages here. And my job is just to kind of greet the speakers, make sure they've got everything they need, make sure the talks go nice and smoothly. And I have to say, we've had a some really great engagement from the crowd and the audience this year. We've had, I would say, record-breaking crowds. I think after an 18-month hiatus away from the show, people are just so glad to be back, and we've just had some incredible crowds on the stage. Some really good engagement, loads of great questions. It's been a really, really good year.
Even just walking around the show, it's immediately obvious how busy it is. I mean, a year and a half ago, it was good, given that we were just coming out of COVID and everything, but it's definitely back. Would you say it's back to sort of pre-COVID levels?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You mentioned COVID, and 18 months ago, it was really difficult because I think we were just coming out of the tail end of COVID. So I think a lot of people were perhaps staying away. A lot of the vendors were thinking, well, is it worth it for us this year? Are we going to get that footfall? So maybe a few of them did stay away. But this year, it seems to have come back with a vengeance, record crowds. And it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the stages, the auditoriums have been packed. And also, there's been an incredible lineup of speakers this year.
Yes, well, yourself included, obviously. On my stage, I've had the likes of Julianne Cost, Scott Kelby, Joe Bradford, a huge lineup of incredible photographers. So personally, from my point of view, it's been great to be able to witness a lot of that. I would have come to the show anyway. I used to come to the show before I worked here. So for me to come here and see all these incredible speakers it's just amazing.
This is take two with Tommy Reynolds. Tommy, usually I say, look what the cat dragged in. I'm not going to say that today. It's amazing to see you again at the show. Thank you so much for taking out some time. I know you've had an incredibly busy day today. Run me through your day. I've seen you on every single stage at the show today. Like, what's going on?
It's been really, really busy. Today I've been on the editing stage talking about how you can adapt AI and automation within your wedding workflow. I've been doing some demos about using only one light. I've been doing that on the photo live stage and also on my sponsored stage, the PixImperfect stand as well.
And then you gave a talk earlier about AI in conjunction with wedding photography and how to simplify your workflow, basically, which is interesting because it sort of ties in with what I've been talking about earlier about video editing and using AI to make your life easier and to simplify everything. So give us a little bit of an insight into how you use AI to speed up your workflow.
I use several different tools, but I think the main one, the best one I use is a tool called Imagine AI. And Imagine AI is a tool that allows you to edit all of your wedding images in one go. So let's say, for example, when you upload 3,000 of your edited images, what it does is it creates your own personal profile. Once you've done that, when you're then done and you want to then upload your wedding catalog, it will then edit all of your photos in about half a second each per photo. So you could have an entire wedding edited in about 10 minutes. Once it's done, you re-download your catalog. You can see all of the changes have been reapplied. But what's nice about this, and this is what the biggest pushback that people have when it comes to editing vast quantities of images, it's, well, how do I know if it's really going to be what I want it to be? And sure, it gets me about 90% there. I'm not 100% there, but that's okay. I mean, 90% there is still pretty good. When I want to make a little tweak, make a little change, I then re-upload the catalog back, and then Imagine will know what tweaks I've made. So my profile just continues to get better and better and better. I'm at a point now where I have 14,000 edited images on my profile. And I did a test recently when I edited one of my own images versus Imagine AI editing that same image. And I have to say, Imagine actually edited it a little bit better.
That itself is crazy. Well, that's where we are, right? 2024.
It's scary, man.
We're here at Nikon, or is it Nikon, with Rob McNeese. Is it Nikon? Is it Nikon? I ask it every year.
It depends what part of the world you come from. I mean, the Americans will call it Nikon. Most people in Europe call it Nikon, but actually the Japanese call it Nikon. So there's 3 different variations of the pronunciation, but I always go with Nikon.
Now I have to remember 3 different ways of pronouncing this. It's not getting easier, is it? I've been shooting Nikon for at least 25 years.
Fantastic.
So I've been on a journey as far as development is concerned. What's new this year? You've had some really exciting products come out this year.
We definitely have, and I've been on a long Nikon journey like yourself, and I have to say that this is probably one of the most exciting years I've ever been at this show. We've got wonderful technology, and we're making class-leading products right now. So we've got obviously the flagship Z9, which launched 2 years ago. But for some photographers, maybe can't justify that expenditure. So we've got the Z8, which has got all the great technology from the Z9. Worth saying that the Z9 was product of the year 2 years ago. The Z8 was the product of the year last year. And also we've launched last year the awesome retro-looking ZF, which if you've come from an original Nikon journey like myself, starting with film cameras, it's got that retro feel, but it's still got our latest technology as well. So it's a fantastic camera and turning a lot of heads for sure.
Exactly, and that was really one of the reasons why, originally I looked at Fuji for that retro feel and form factor, and since the DF, I've definitely been looking back at Nikon for exactly that.
Absolutely.
There's been so many developments, but also, of course, Nikon has acquired Red cameras this year.
Yeah.
What's the thinking behind that, and what can we expect from Nikon?
I don't know anything about it yet. We genuinely don't. I mean, it's a business decision that's been made. We're really excited about it because they've got some great technology. We've got some great technology. Hopefully we can share some synergies, and hopefully some of their technology will filter down into our cameras and maybe vice versa. But we really don't know. But we're so excited about the prospect of working together. It's obviously all the access to Netflix and things like that as well. So it's a big, bold move for Nikon, but we don't have any details at this stage. I think it's going to take a while before anything happens, but it's going to be good for sure.
I'm going to be badgering you guys over the next 3 months to find out more about it, because this is super exciting. For somebody who does stills photography and video, this is really very exciting news, especially on the video front, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we're putting some of the best video capabilities into our cameras, like the Z8 and the Z9, but we don't have that real heritage of video like some other brands. But with the synergy with Red, we'll see that come through for sure. And I think it will be a real sort of stamp on the video industry for Nikon. Definitely.
The next highlight, it's a big one. After years of trying, I finally managed to get Scott Kelby, yes, the Scott Kelby, on the show. It all came together after a serendipitous meeting at the photography show, where I might have twisted his arm just a little bit. Of course, bonding over our shared love for guitars certainly didn't hurt either. Here's a snippet from that long-awaited conversation.
It's that's what the photography show is known for. There's lots of fun events like that all over the shop. Did you enjoy it? You were there for quite a few days.
Oh, yeah. I was there I spoke 3 days in a row, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And that was my second time speaking at the event. I'd spoken there before, and it's a great show. If you haven't been, it's surprising the scope and scale of it. It's giant. It's a giant. It takes 3 days to see everything. And there's so many photo shoots going on the show floor. And this is something that, go back 10 years ago, you were lucky to see one or two booths that had someone, a model or a car or a motorcycle or something set up. And now you're more likely to see, 80, 90 booths with all kinds of setups and photography, and you walk up and they've built these elaborate setups and things. I saw somebody with show dogs, like really, really beautifully groomed show dogs, and you could just walk up and take pictures. And, they had all kinds of still lifes, and they had models in every kind of amazing, setups with these elaborate just backdrops and stuff. There was a really convincing one it was a full-size, London telephone booth or English telephone booth with, the Elizabeth Tower. That's the proper name, by the way, renamed for Her Majesty's 75th Diamond Jubilee. Anyway, so Big Ben basically in the background, also known officially as the Elizabeth Tower. And it was really well done. I mean, you looked at the shots and it looked like they were there. It was really well done. There's just a lot of things like that. As you walk around the floor, there were just people shooting everywhere. So there was a ton of education, a ton of photography, opportunities to shoot already lit sets with professional models and professional sets. It's a great, great show. It's got to be the value of the year. Like, where else can you pay that little amount of money and for 3 days just have an amazing experience? Photo shoots and classes and education and seeing all the latest new stuff, playing with all the latest new stuff. Nikon had a setup where they had all of their long lenses, and you could just go up and just look all the way across. You could see what's a 600 look like, what's an 800 look like. They had lots of cool stuff everywhere you went. There was just, more stuff to do. That's a wonderful show. It really, really is. It's underrated because it's really a brilliant show.
Yeah, there was lots of fun stuff. There was this whole set that was an upside down room. Did you see that? Where a table on the ceiling?
I saw pictures of it, but I didn't see I never went by that actual booth, but I saw people posting pictures from it.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps.
Collaborations were a massive theme on the Camera Shake podcast in 2024, and one of my absolute highlights was teaming up with my podcasting buddies Dave Clayton from He Shoots, He Draws and Steve Brazel from Behind the Shot. These two guys have been heroes of mine since before I ever hit record on this podcast, so sharing an episode with them to chat about the highs, lows, and behind-the-scenes realities of running a photography podcast was a true honor. Here's a moment from that epic crossover.
Podcasting really wasn't a plan for us. It was just something we sort of fell into. And then obviously I met Kirsten, and what both of you have done with each of your shows, the production value and the fact that you do it on video, which I've never done as He Shoots, He Draws. So this is a first for me to do like a proper video episode as well.
See, this is going to radio. That to me is, that's what Scott Bourne used to say to me all the time was, I don't like doing video shows, but I'll do it for you, but I have a face for radio. It's the reason I'm in radio is because I have a face for radio. But we probably should explain that if you have ever wanted to know about podcasting, the ups, the downs, the successes, the failures, that's the idea of this, is it's three people who have been doing podcasting for a while, and we're just going to spend the next however long talking about making our podcast and what we think of it after having done it for so long. But that is an interesting one to me, because for me, I originally, when I was on the TWIP network, Frederick Van Johnson's network, This Week in Photo, originally for the first year and a half, I came to him and said it has to be video because I'm taking one photograph on my podcast, Behind the Shot. I take one photograph and we dissect with the photographer how it was made, right? So we talk about the choices that they made and why they made those choices in making the shot. And to me, that had to be video. But I also release an audio only version of it. Kirsten, you do both audio only and video, right? But only audio in a podcast app, right?
Yes, correct. That's just simply because my podcast host doesn't, it doesn't feature video. So I use YouTube as a release platform for video. But just like you, actually, when my friend Nick and I, when we first started the podcast at the very beginning of the pandemic, it was an absolute no-brainer. I think we never thought not to do video, just simply because, I'm a photographer. Nick is a filmmaker, videographer, and we're talking about a visual medium. So it made absolute perfect sense to create a version of that show that was visual, especially because, we were talking, we would have guests on the show and we would talk about their photography. So you want to have a way to showcase that photography, and, video makes perfect sense rather than having to rely on verbally describing what that picture looks like. It makes, or maybe even like posting it on social media or something. It makes perfect sense to have that ability. And also, I always felt that there's sort of a connection that you create with the other person, like with the guests, if you can actually see each other. So, and I honestly, I don't think we ever thought not to do video. It was just a natural thing right from the first day. That doesn't mean to say that we knew how to do it. We absolutely did not know how to do any of it or how any of it worked. Like, we had zero idea.
I agree. Like my early episodes, because I do video, I had like this little teeny webcam and horrible lighting, and I'm afraid to share those old shows because I don't want anybody to see the video. But from early on, I was both audio and video. And actually, I have both video and audio in podcast feeds. And the video is also on YouTube. But Dave, I don't understand why when you started He Shoots, He Draws, video, I mean, YouTube was big. What made you must have made that conscious choice that you don't want to, aside from the radio face. Why not? Or why not now?
Well, in the beginning, I mean, the show started really from, obviously, for anyone who doesn't know myself or Glyn, we actually met through Scott Kelby back in 2010 and became fast friends, and we would chat every day, and we collaborated on so much together. And it was 2018 that we were kind of talking to each other nearly every day, and we were ranting. We were talking about things in the industry. And I'd started listening to podcasts. I was, grew up listening to the radio. I like that format of the mystery of radio. I don't like radio shows necessarily with the video feed because I like to hear them. And I just said to Glyn, do you know what? Some of these things we talk about, I think we could do a podcast. And it doesn't really matter who listens to us because it's just an excuse for us to talk every week and just talk about things we like, dislike, and if you ever go back and listen to like the first 10, I think episode 4 was our first guest, and it was Alan Hess, bizarrely enough. And Glyn and I were just talking about things in the industry, kind of having a bit of a laugh about things like award winning. A lot of photographers always had award winning in their profiles but never said what awards they won, and we kind of did some joke ads. We actually like paid for voiceover people to make some ads, and we were just having a bit of a giggle. But the intention was to get it done and get it out, and audio was the quickest way of doing it. 2 guys on a mic recording the audio. Glyn used to edit it. We got the intro. We got the lovely David McClelland, who's a good friend of ours, who's on British TV. He did the intro for us. He's the voice of you're listening to He Shoots, He Draws podcast. And it kind of just, the momentum was there. Now, weirdly, every single episode of the 183 that we've currently got all had video because we did every single one on Zoom so that we could see the guest, because we had a thing of when we were talking, we'd say to the guests, we'd do the clap. I mean, the first few episodes weren't guests. It was only later on we decided, wow, we know so many people in the industry. Let's talk to them about stuff. So we'd hold our hand up like in class so that we weren't talking over each other, because that can be quite frustrating. So bizarrely, I don't think I've got all of them, but I had quite a few of them saved, and then it was racking up space on my computer. But every single episode was on video. But weirdly, whenever we used to say to the guests that we had on, don't worry, it's not going to be video, but we're going to be on video to see each other, they were quite relieved, because it was less effort for them. They could just sit in their living room, sit in the bathroom, sit wherever, and we could just talk, and we wouldn't have the extra hassle of having to look good on camera. I mean, Glenn is great on camera. He's so professional, and I feel that I know I'll undersell myself, but I just felt like I liked the idea of podcast is audio for me. It was like that was the medium, so it was easy to do. Weirdly, we got some great numbers. I mean, bittersweet that the podcast started the week after my dad passed away, so I'll always remember when we did our first episode.
If you've ever dabbled in Photoshop, chances are you know my next guest, Unmesh Dinda, better known as PixImperfect. He's the go-to guy on YouTube for Photoshop and photo editing knowledge, and getting him on the show was an absolute thrill. We dove into the future of editing tools, creative workflows, and so much more. Here's a sneak peek at that conversation.
Where is this AI thing going? What do you think?
It is very unpredictable, to be honest, and I don't know where this is going. What I know definitely is AI is coming from all directions, and Adobe is just trying to keep up with the competition. That is all. Now, generative AI, Adobe is not the first company to do it. Now, there has been several companies before it. One of the first that really broke the internet was Midjourney. So I made a video about Midjourney, and during that time, Adobe did not have anything of generative AI or anything, I think, planned, at least to the public. And then they came out with it. So whatever AI tools we see it in Adobe, they're just doing it, just at least trying to do it the legal way, the right way, which has already come before. So Adobe is just following what is coming on. And where this goes, this is completely crazy, because right now, you can use AI to do almost anything. Now, I'm sure that in the future, certain Photoshop processes can also become automated as well. Now, again, it is not just limited to Photoshop. There are also several AI plugins. For example, I use AI plugins for retouching. Things that used to take, for example, 2 to 3 hours just to retouch that, just to dodge and burn those little ups and downs of the skin. There are AI plugins that can automatically do it for you. So, it's just very impossible to predict where this is going. And to a lot of people, I do understand that this can get scary as well.
And that's the thing, because I think people generally fall into two camps. Either the adopters, who are like, yeah, AI is the future, is awesome, let's go. And then you have the other camp, if you want, people who are maybe a little bit afraid of it. Do you think AI has caused as much of an uproar as maybe the introduction of Photoshop in the first place?
I was in one of the Photoshop discussions in a few, maybe last Max, and they were discussing new features. And the talk was that after layers, so when layers were introduced in Photoshop, it was one of the biggest revolutions in image editing, right? Now, AI is such an introduction that has outdone layers in Photoshop. Layers was probably introduced more than decades ago, probably. I'm not sure when. But I think when generative AI was introduced, that people said that after layers, this is the biggest change that Photoshop has ever brought. So, yeah, it's been insane.
I mean, layers was no doubt an incredible advancement, and actually I think a really great mental leap. Although you look back at these things, you think, well, this makes perfect sense. Why hasn't anybody thought about this earlier, right? In retrospect. But
absolutely.
for the time, I thought it was a great mental leap. And, I have to say, I mean, even when I started with Photoshop, which I can't even remember what that was. It was like before it was the Creative Suite, so it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But they already had layers. I'm pretty sure they already had layers at the time. So, but at least the introduction of layers wasn't as controversial. It wasn't like people having like really strong opinions about it. Yeah,
right.
It's like, oh, no way, you cannot use layers. That's now you're faking it. If you use layers, man, what you doing?
Then again, we did have the conversation of for a long time before generative AI. We did have the conversation. A lot of photographers used to say, I'm a photographer. I don't use Photoshop. So there was always this conversation around Photoshop in image competitions and photography exhibitions. Like if somebody has used Photoshop, people would look down upon that person, usually in a lot of situations. So I think the same has come around with AI. It's always going to be coming around, I think. I'm not sure. I'm not that old to know this, but I'm sure a similar amount of resistance might have come when we switched to digital from film. So there's always going to be this uproar. But I think AI, a lot of the reason why AI is being debated is because of what is AI being trained on. That is what people are, controversial about. Because if the AI was trained on something that it was not allowed to, for example, somebody's works or somebody's copyrighted work, and I'm creating something with that style, would that be stealing or would that not be stealing? I don't know. When a human trains on something, let's say I'm learning art, and I'm learning on the arts of people that other people have created. I'm learning on Picasso, I'm learning on Leonardo da Vinci, I'm learning on lots of these masters, or these are old works, but I'm learning on the recent artists as well. And inspired by them, if I create something, it's all right. But if the AI trains on that and AI creates something, it's not all right. So it's again, a discussion, a debate that there is no answer for it. I don't know what is right or what is wrong. It is just a debate. But then again, it sometimes seems not right. And that's what Adobe is trying to do, is that they're trying to train their AI on licensed stock photos that they own the rights to, so that it is, commercially usable.
So that's an interesting thing, because you mentioned that a minute ago that Adobe are trying to stay legal almost. So rather than just trailing the internet and basically doing a Google search for a particular image, like, I don't know, cat on a skateboard or something, and then creating lots of cats based on images of cats that, AI finds on the interwebs. The source of those images, you're saying, is basically based entirely on Adobe's own back catalog?
Yes. So from what they have in their FAQs, if you look at it, Adobe Firefly AI model is trained on their own stock catalog.
Another highlight of this year was having the one and only Gavin Hoey, the face of Adorama's YouTube channel and an absolute powerhouse of photography education, on the show. Gavin's infectious enthusiasm for teaching and his incredible skill made for an unforgettable chat. Take a listen to this.
How do you plan your videos? Do you plan them like months in advance, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, the timescale is my videos for Adorama need to be done, completed, and over to them to check, because believe it or not, they do actually check everything before it goes out, and I have some contractual things I have to fulfill. So they need 2 weeks to do that. I need about 2 weeks to edit it, and the planning can take anything from a few weeks to a few years in some cases. Some things I've planned and still haven't done yet. I will get around to some of them. So the timescale can be a little bit kind of varied, but by and large, I'm working about 3 or 4 weeks ahead of you actually seeing it. What people don't see is the bit that takes the time. So the planning, the organization, and the editing, particularly the editing, can take a lot longer. A 10-minute video can take me 3, 4, 5 days to edit sometimes. It's and I do that. I do all the editing. I'm the producer, the director. Can I call myself the star? Don't really want to do that, but
the talent.
The talent. Yeah, again, that's possibly stretching it some days, but also the editor as well. So I kind of like to do everything. I I'm a little bit of a control freak, maybe. I like all that kind of process. I enjoy the whole thing from start to finish. So, yeah, a few weeks to get there.
Do you script them out beforehand? Or like how tight do you plan them?
I can't read. I mean, I can read, but I can't read a script. I mean, if there was an auto cue in front of me now, I would be hopeless. I don't know how anyone can do that. I mean, I'm never going to be a newsreader or a presenter or anything like that. I couldn't read off an auto cue. And when I do have a script, and I've done a few things with scripts, it sounds scripted and horrible and daft, and it's just not me. So I have bullet points. So I will write down an idea. Let's say it's going to be, portrait lighting, and we're going to do kind of classic butterfly light. So I'll put down an idea of explain why, and that's it. It'll just say that, explain why. Place light, and that'll be it. And then I'll fill in the blanks. Usually we do 2 or 3 takes. Normally, actually, we start by doing 3 takes at the very beginning. And once I've got into my flow and everyone else is sitting around going, oh, come on, really? You want to do another take? That was fine. I end up doing just 1 or 2 by the end. But I try and do a couple of takes because sometimes you get things right the first time and sometimes you miss an important point out. But if I don't have a script, I have bullet points, and I try and stick the important stuff in the bullet points. And by and large, I kind of get most things across. I think it feels more natural that way. That's my interpretation.
It's I think, whichever sort of method you use, because I sort of I do some things off the cuff and some things I do with an audio cue, and I found that it really takes some time to get used to the audio cue and to avoid it feeling like or sounding really stale. I think it's sometimes, at least in my experience, it's because you write things differently from the way that you would naturally say them.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if you wrote it down in a way that was actually scripted, as in a novel, you would never speak like that. And if you write it down in a way that you would actually say it, maybe that would be a way of working. I don't know. I've not really tried it, but I kind of like the slightly impromptu moments as well. It's amazing how many times it's not until I've said it out loud the first time that the second time when I say it, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, now I want to make that bit more emphasized because it's more important. When I have had a script, you get everything over, but you lose a little bit of the passion. But as you say, it's perhaps a skill. So if you've got that skill, good on you.
Yeah, it's I think that pros and cons. Like for me, the scripting part, I always go to a local cafe, and I basically sit down with my headphones on, and I just get down and I write the main draft of the script, and I really quite enjoy that process. So that for me is nice. It's then when I get home, I then tweak it a little bit. The one thing I have found is that, and it's it might be partially because maybe I'm not a native, but it's probably because I'm not a native English speaker or whatever. But I find that, especially with short videos, anything between 5 and 10 minutes, let's say, I find that if I have the lion's share of it scripted, it actually saves me time in the edit later on, because I don't necessarily have to do multiple takes. Usually by now I can sort of just go through it once and it's done. And I also don't have to like cut out all these annoying filler words, like starting every other sentence with so. Or,
So, that's my I'm terrible. So, yeah, that's dreadful. If you leave a gap after the word so, you can just chop it there. That's kind of useful. Yeah. But yeah, that's so, and then start talking. I'm terrible at that. But I think the way to do it, if this is something that anybody out there wants to try, and that is to try and make it like a template. So if you watch my videos, they stick to a standard template. So there'll be a short introduction. There will be a 1, 2, or usually 3 techniques that I'm trying to demonstrate. Each one is sort of built on the back of the other. And then there will be an outro at the end. So I have this kind of thing that I know how long it's going to be. I know how I'm going to break it down into bits and pieces. And that tends to work much better for the editing process. Like your podcast, you have an intro, you have a series of parts that you're going to build in. And when you do, you find that editing this is probably going to, I say editing this, we're basically doing this live, then it just makes life a little bit easier for you as a producer. So if this is a thing you want to do, make yourself a little kind of template and, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this.
That's it. It's just making it repeatable. I think that's the important part. And it's a learning process in the beginning. It definitely was for me. Just doing this podcast was a major learning curve. How was it for you when you first got into making YouTube videos? Because you started making videos quite some time before you started with Adorama TV. Is that right?
Yeah. So I started making video content back in 2000. Was my first video stuff. So I had a full-time job. I was doing proper work, and I was reading a camera magazine. And in the camera magazine, they were asking for photographers to produce educational content. So back in the day, cast your mind back, way back into the 2000s, when we used to buy physical magazines. On the cover of the magazine was a CD. Do you remember those? Did you ever see those?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank goodness. You say this to some generations now. My daughter will be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So on the CD was recorded Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, as I was doing, and Paint Shop Pro. Takes you back. Yeah, they were tutorials. So they were screen recording tutorials. So that's where I cut my teeth. So I had this sort of moment of extreme enthusiasm and kind of like, yeah, I can actually do this. I had no idea how. So I contacted them and said, yeah, I can do that. And they contacted me back and said, go on then. And I had to learn how to do it. So I kind of started there and built from there. And then after a few years of doing that, video came along. And I thought, well, the Photoshop bit is fun. I enjoyed that. But there's the photography bit, which you kind of need to know. So I made them a photography video that went with one of the tutorials for the magazine. And I sent it to them and they said, this is brilliant. We can't use it. It's too big to go on the CD. Because it was a CD. They didn't have DVDs because they had to pay extra. Or you had to pay for the rights for a DVD. So it wouldn't fit on the CD. So I ended up with this video that I had no use for and ended up putting it on this little tiny website called YouTube that no one had heard of. I mean, so I couldn't believe it. They would actually put a video on for free. Mad.
Macro photography has always been one of those genres that blows my mind. The ability to uncover and capture a hidden world, one we can't see with the naked eye, is nothing short of magical. And when it comes to macro photography, Stewart Wood is in a league of his own. His images are intricate, alien, and absolutely breathtaking. Check out this moment from our conversation.
Have you ever photographed children?
Yes.
It's basically the same thing. You got to. Either they run around and get tired and then just stop for a moment to take a breathe, which is when you get the shot, or you give them something to do. So typically, if I've got a jumper spider that won't cooperate, I'll give it a fly to feed it, and then it's like giving a child an ice cream when you want to take a picture of a child. They stop running around and they're eating their ice cream. It's basically the same thing. So you feed it, give it something to do. That they like to explore, jumping spiders do. So if you move it onto a different environment, it might start exploring the environment, and you can kind of predict where it's going to go. So if it's coming up the back of a flower, you can predict it's going to come up the top of the flower, and you can get into place quickly and get the shot as it comes over.
So do you catch them and then take them inside and photograph them, or do you literally photograph them in situ?
There's different levels. I mean, my pet jumping spider, which I have on my shelf behind me, they are literally there for testing equipment, because obviously I do reviews on YouTube. I teach macro, so they're very useful for teaching macro. Wild jumping spiders, I try to capture them in their environment if I'm able to, but sometimes you can't do that, so I might move it if it's a species I haven't photographed before. I might move it onto one of my platypod setups, so that I can get a decent picture of it. But most of the time, I'm trying to get them in situ, unless it's my pet one, of course. And again, if I wasn't teaching macro or doing YouTube, I probably wouldn't have pet jumping spiders, but they're just great for teaching macro photography.
So it's literally a test spider.
It is like having a test spider, yeah. So if someone sends me a lens for review, the first thing I photograph is my spider, because I'm very familiar with them. And if there's an issue with one of the lenses or a camera setup, I'll immediately spot it by photographing my pet jumping spiders.
And I noticed you just mentioned Platypod, of course.
Yeah.
I know you're a Platypod pro.
Yes.
Just like myself. So welcome to the world.
Yeah.
Platypod. There you go.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. Exactly. Incredible tools. I mean, how we'll get into how you photograph these spiders. But what is the sort of the toolkit in order to photograph, bugs and spiders? Outdoors or in the studio? How do you?
Like I said before, I said it on one of my last videos I uploaded. If I wasn't doing YouTube, I probably wouldn't do studio macro. I'd be completely outdoor macro. But from a teaching point of view, the studio it's a great tool for teaching. Okay, so if we stick to my personal work, that is outdoor work. Okay. And to photograph the bugs outdoors, you really need a setup that is geared towards macro photography. Now, you can do it on any camera. You can use extension tubes to convert your normal lenses into a macro lens. But if you want to get the results like I do, you really got to start gearing towards actual macro gear. And one of the key things is your camera needs to be fast, because these things are moving around. You need to get the shot very, very quickly. So knowing your gear, knowing how to quickly alter your settings, and above all, knowing the species you're photographing as well. Like if we take, for instance, a jumper spider, I know roughly what it's going to do. I know it's going to have a look around on the plant and all that. If we take the crab spider, I'm not familiar with the crab spider, so I keep missing shots because they're very skittish. So each species, you've got to approach them from a different perspective. So you've got your one that's scared, you've got the other one that's adventurous. The jumper spiders will quite often jump onto your camera, which can be a bit daunting because there's so many little nooks and crannies that they can get into that, you might have a spider inside your diffuser, but then when you're photographing other spiders, they're completely different. So, yeah, the number one thing you really need to do is know your subject that you're photographing. That way you can predict what they are going to do when you start photographing them.
And I guess that's exactly where the crossover to wildlife photography is,
yes.
Where you just need to know the animal that you photograph. I mean, regardless as to whether it's a lion, for example, or a dog, or a spider.
It's basically the same for most genres. You need to know the subject that you're photographing to give you, I'd say, better odds of getting a shot is probably the best way to put it. If you don't know a species, you might get the odd shot that works, but with macro, you're talking 1 out of 100 shots will be okay. I won't say they're the best shot. It'll be okay or satisfactory. So anything you can do to increase the odds is in your favour, basically. So you want a fast camera. When I say fast camera, I'm on about the frames per second. You want a flash. If you're using flash, that is, you want a flash that can recycle quickly. If you're using natural light, then obviously it's a frame rate of the camera. The more frames you can bang out, the more chance you've got one that's in focus. Because typically with macro photography, we're not using autofocus, we're using manual focus. And when it comes to a macro lens, we typically set the magnification that we want off that setup. So if you imagine if you're handheld at 1 times magnification, you're moving backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. The spider's moving around. It's a very split-second chance that your focus is bang on where you want it. So the more shots you can bang out, the better. It's a nightmare in editing, but at least you get that one shot that's in focus.
I mean, in the macro world, I find, focus is difficult at the best of times. I shoot toys once in a while, and it's difficult to actually just get a Lego figure into focus. There are techniques like focus stacking, for example, but I'm guessing that when you're hand-holding, focus stacking is not really an option.
To be honest with you, half of my stuff is handheld focus stack.
How do you do that?
I'll be honest with you, it's the camera.
Right.
I use the Olympus system, and its stabilization is absolutely phenomenal. If I was to get my Canon setup out, I have done handheld, but again, your hit rate is a lot lower. So you might take 500 to 1,000 shots to get one stack that works. With the Olympus, I'm constantly banging out shots because, again, the speed of the camera is fast and the stabilization is very good in that camera. So there's that. And then there's also the other technique, which is going out in the middle of the night, because in the middle of the night, the insects are too cold to move about, so they literally just sit still for you, Hard to spot them sometimes because they're not moving, but when you find one and it's just sitting there, you can literally spend half an hour setting up a scene if you wanted to. They're not going anywhere. They're too cold,
That's actually a great tip. I didn't know that. I mean, that's a great idea.
So insects are exothermic, so they don't produce their own body warmth. So in the morning, when the sun comes up, you'll find the insects, they'll be sunbathing, essentially. And what they're doing is they're warming up, ready to move about in the day. So if you can catch them before they're warmed up, they're not going anywhere. Dragonflies won't fly about. Damselflies won't fly about. You got time to set up, And some of my best shots I've got in my portfolio have been taken at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, plenty of time to get set up and get everything done, And they still move about. I'll be honest with you, they do still move about, but it's very, very subtle. I mean, like they might move a leg or something like that, but you've got time to retake the shot again. Unlike in the middle of the day, very good chance you get one shot, a single shot, and it'll fly away. So yeah, it all comes down to your personal choice as to whether you want to go out in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's personal choice. I love it. I really do.
From one Adorama superstar to another, I was beyond excited to welcome back my good buddy Mark Wallace this year. Mark's knowledge, passion, and endless enthusiasm for photography have been a huge influence on me since my early days behind the camera. Having him back on the podcast was an absolute treat. Here's a highlight from that chat.
A lot of people will say, can you please do a video comparing the latest Nikon to the latest Sony to the latest Canon and tell us what you think about, this latest gadget? I'm like, I wish I could. When I was doing Adorama TV, fortunately, Adorama has everything. And so I could request those things to be sent to me. But now I'm on my own, back to the same way I started. And so the only way to do those kinds of videos is I have to actually buy those cameras or find some company that's going to loan them to me. And that's a difficult thing nowadays. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was much, much easier to work with brands than it is now. Because, when I started, I think my first YouTube video was 2006. 2006. And on YouTube, it was Zach Arias. It was me. It was, I think, Chase Jarvis. I think Fro was on. He was just starting out. That was about it. I mean, there were just a few people. And so, the brands were working with maybe 10 people. Now there's, I don't know how many thousands of people on YouTube creating content and doing a really, really, really good job of it, by the way. It's the competition is much more fierce, I guess you would say. That's a good thing, I think. Some ways it's not so much of a good thing, but that's where we are. And instead of trying to, rawr, back in my day, you embrace it. I love to see the new editing styles, the new filming styles, the stuff that we would have never thought of that newer, younger creators are doing now.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a thing. I mean, especially when it comes to editing, I remember when I first got into watching YouTube videos, to learn more about, let's say, Photoshop, for example. It was a lot more manual in many ways back then. You had to learn procedures and techniques and stuff. And I watched your latest Evoto video, and it's interesting actually that you made that, because Evoto approached me too about making a video of them. And so it was actually interesting watching your video. And I'm really like, a lot of the stuff, like with the skin retouching, for example, frequency separation, that was a technique you had to learn. Like, you had to actually get good at that.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's like, you move a slider. Ta-da!
It's so crazy. I mean, like the frequency separation stuff, it took me a while to learn how to do that and do it properly. And then I scripted out, I think I used a teleprompter, because you have to follow these steps very precisely. And I created a video how to do frequency separation. And it was so complicated that when I would go to do frequency separation, I would watch my own video to remember how to do it, because, you had to make sure you did it all in the right order. I wasn't doing it every day. So, with Evoto, with Luminar Neo, In fact, Luminar is coming out with a brand new face retouching software. So Luminar is more for scenic photos, architectural photos, general photography, and it does a really good job with that. It doesn't really do a good job with skin retouching and the stuff that Evoto just knocks out of the park. So it's sort of been this really easy decision. If you were a scenic or landscape photographer and you wanted AI to help you out, you'd go get Luminar Neo. And if you wanted to have a workflow that was incredibly fast and knock out skin retouching and all of that stuff, you'd just use Evoto. But now I think it's Affinity is the name of the software I don't know if they've announced it or not. I just got an email from them, but it's going to be interesting to see how things evolve. And I've been talking a lot with the guys at Evoto. They're in Singapore about their roadmap, about their integrations with Lightroom and Photoshop and plugins and catalog stuff. And, they're trying to do a lot of things to make that workflow a lot easier and better. And I'm also talking with the guys over in France with DxO. So I did I think I did 12 or 14 classes with f-stoppers for DxO Photo Lab and Pure Raw and the Nik collection, and like every single application that DxO creates, I've created a class. It's over on f-stoppers. So it's really fun now to be able to talk to those guys. And I used to be a software developer. I worked at Intel for 10 years. And so I was a senior programmer analyst, and then I managed a bunch of developers. And so I sort of know that world and how it works. It's really sort of exciting to see all that stuff.
Yeah, and especially, with AI coming into the frame as well at the same time, it's, the ease of use, or whatever the technical term is, ease of usability, whatever, it's so different now. And of course, it then from an educator's point of view, I sometimes think if you were to do something like Flern, for example, today,
right?
Like, you have in many ways, you have a lot less to teach, in a sense. Would you agree with that, or?
Well, I don't think so, because there are always those very specialized things that you need to do. I mean, look at PixImperfect. He's a genius. I mean, that channel, and he does things that are so incredible in 30 seconds. They're mind blowing. And he's got the best hair on the planet. But those kind of channels are always going to be there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Umar, I can't pronounce his surname. Anyway, Umar from PixImperfect. He was on the show a few weeks ago. If you listen to this, or if you're watching this, make sure you check out that episode. That was super fun having you on the show. And you're absolutely right, an absolute genius. It's
genius.
Also really, it's really interesting also to watch his channel. I've been following his channel for years, and really the way that channel has developed, is the production quality on that today is so different from what it was.
Right.
And yet his hair has stayed perfect for the whole time.
My hair has not changed either. This has only gone gray. That's it. Well, the interesting thing is the new content that's coming out. I have seen a difference between sort of the style overpowering the teaching. I do see that a lot. That's frustrating. You get these videos that look fantastic. They're edited. They've got fantastic music, but there's just nothing to them. So I think that's one of the negative sides to having a lot of influencers and creators and stuff that back in my day, there were a lot of people that learned how to teach. And that's where they started from. Teachers that actually knew how to lay out a plan of the principle and the application and, the handles where you could grab on and apply that stuff. So that I'm seeing is one of those gaps. So there are a few people that do it really, really well. They have the style, the editing, the presentation, like PixImperfect. That's a fantastic example because he doesn't only have great content, but his content looks fantastic. It's well presented. And I won't name names, but there are others that it's just a clickbait thumbnail. You hop in there, they've got the latest gadget and they say it's fantastic and they're off and running, to the next video. And it's just all about, how many eyeballs they can get, that sort of is the fault of the algorithm and what's happened to YouTube. So I don't really fault them, because if you're going to earn any money on YouTube, you have to have a lot of watch hours. You got to not only have a lot of views, those views have to stick around and watch the videos. And so the only way to do that is to sort of do the cliffhanger video, where it's like, in this episode, I'm going to show you the one thing that you're doing with your camera that could destroy your career. But first, that kind of stuff, because you have to get people to keep watching. So I blame that on YouTube, not so much the content creators.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the problem with with a platform that really balloons out of all proportion, over time, because everybody's competing for the same watch time ultimately, and it's one of those things. For this channel, for instance, watch time is also very important, but the vast majority of people who consume this podcast are quite evidently consuming it on audio. So, getting those people to come over to YouTube and actually to create that. So, for instance, that minimum of watch time hours that you need to even, be monetized, for example. On YouTube, that it took absolutely flipping forever with this.
My Shifty Drifty channel is not monetized, because the only way you can get to monetization, first you got to get 1,000 subscribers to get at the base level. Then I think you're a partner, but you can't monetize. And you have to, it's 1,000 watch hours within 365 days. It's 10,000.
4,000.
Is it 4,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it rolls off. So if you have got a great video that you made in January and you're at 3,500 in December, and you only get a couple hundred videos, then in January that video rolls. You got to so it forces you to just keep creating content. So I sort of like that, because it does set a bar that says, if you're going to monetize, you have to be serious about it. You've got to create. You have to be a creator.
When someone's known by just one name, you already know they're a big deal. And Vanelli, well, he's a legend. This year, I finally had the chance to sit down with him for a long overdue conversation. Vanelli's knowledge, style, and boundless energy continue to blow my mind every time we talk. Here's a golden nugget from that episode.
Gotta ask, Triple Crown champion in karate. I did not know that about you.
Yeah, so I was the youngest Triple Crown, meaning I was rated in fighting, forms, and weapons. And I'm glad you brought that up, not because of my past, because people have goals. They set goals for themselves, and photography is the same way. Goals are okay, but you want a roadmap. You want to be able to a repeatable format that it worked in this area. Now it's going to work in this area. So I was fortunate coming up through getting ready for the Olympics, getting ready for the Triple Crown Championship, because it was called luck, L-U-C-K, laboring under correct knowledge. And if you have the luck, it's because you're laboring or learning from people who've accomplished what you want. My brother John was the undefeated heavyweight champion. My instructor, which my brother John's instructor and my instructor, was also a Triple Crown champion. And then Bill Superfoot Wallace was one of my main mentors, who was the undefeated middleweight champion. And he's 78 years old right now, and he's still teaching live workshops on a weekly basis. So if you want to become great, take what you've already been accomplished at, and then figure out what made you great in that area, and luck, laboring under correct knowledge, apply it to your photography, and you'll see how your skills are just, boom, through the roof. So yes, thank you about the karate. Again, that was 1984, 5, and 6, probably before you were born.
No. I was actually already. I tell you what, that was the time of Karate Kid, the movie. I remember it. Ralph Macchio.
Yep.
It's a perfect time.
We went from, it's so funny, we went from something like 60 students, and I'm not kidding, to 1,200 students.
Wow.
In one school, and then we opened up another school and had another 1,200 students in that school. And we were the number 1 and number 2 school in the country. And it was neat, because at the age of 18, I'm being mentored by Zig Ziglar, Dr. Dennis Waitley, So there's a lot of perks that come along with some of the stuff that we did. And I was just fortunate. I was at the right place at the right time, learning under the correct people to get me to where I had to go. And then when I stepped down in 86, I was 22, and I opened up my own karate school using the philosophy of what I've learned there. And then, as you know, I had a dual career all this time, photography and karate. And then when the photography just got overwhelming, I relinquished after 35 years my studio to my black belts and let them carry on the tradition. And of course, styling came along, and that's where I'm working for them, full-time since 2015. So 2018 full-time. 2015, I've been associated with them. So that was a good segue. I'm glad you brought that up. Usually I try to shy away from that.
Well, I thought it was such an interesting fact because I didn't know that about you, the karate connection, of course. I thought, when I read that, I thought, well, I'm sure there's got to be a connection between, the rigor and the discipline required to get good at karate, especially getting to that level, there's got to be a connection between that and in the way that you apply that to your photography.
Exactly. And I want to show you the formula. In fact, our real good friend, Glenn Dewis, I don't know if you knew this about Glenn. He was a bodybuilder.
Oh, yes, I did know that. Yeah.
And he won. I mean, the man was incredible. And it's so neat that he applied what made him successful as a bodybuilder to his photography and then to his education. So there's a lot of people. Scott Kelby was an extremely talented musician. Never made it to the national level, but he and his wife, they had a band, and that's how they started out coming up through. So it's neat how you look back. Well, even like Peter Hurley, for example, was a very successful model. And now here he is doing photography and taking what he learned from there and applying it to another genre.
And actually, Peter Hurley was an Olympic sailor. I believe he was in the Olympic Games, actually.
Well, that and a boat, World Cup.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. So it just goes to show that actually, if you want to get good at anything, the basic principles sort of remain the same in many ways.
Exactly. Yep. And I'd love to explain how to do it in photography. So you've already heard me talk about luck, laboring under correct knowledge. So if you're just starting out, my suggestion, find somebody who you admire, you love their work, and you humbly ask, hey, could you mentor me in this? So that's number one. You find someone who's doing what you love to do and, appeal to them and say, look, I really love the way you present your photography. I want to learn how to represent your style, and work it towards my own and become similar to what you're doing. So most photographers will and we'll get into that in a moment, most photographers will jump on that chance of mentoring. And the second thing, if you're a new photographer, please do not do what I used to do on my golf game. I can't buy golf. I would buy the latest clubs, the best balls. I used to joke when I walk into the pro shop, I would go, Schmitty, if I buy this shirt, he goes, Mr. Vanelli, you buy that shirt, guaranteed, it'll knock 2 strokes off your game. And people were in there going, really? I said, well, yeah, because the way it lets venting the air in, it helps with your swing. Really? No. Come on, people. You can't buy your golf game, just like photographers can't buy their photography. So my suggestion is get a good camera, but don't get like the most expensive one. Use that money for education. So, why buy a Ferrari if you don't have a driver's license? Learn how to become a great photographer. Then you could decide, what gear do I need to really make me excel in these areas?
And last but certainly not least, one of my standout highlights from 2024 was my conversation with the phenomenal Paul Mobley. With a career spanning Hollywood celebrity portraits, deeply personal photography projects, and iconic books like American Farmer, Paul has left an incredible mark on the world of portrait photography. It was an absolute honor to have him on the show. Here's a moment you won't want to miss. How did you get to photograph celebrities?
Well, I don't know that there's a roadmap to do that. It's, I had started doing commercial photography back after I graduated from college, went to New York, did the starving artist thing, and just started shooting things that I liked to shoot, which were primarily people, interesting people that either made me laugh or there was something about them that I thought I could capture, kind of this iconic moment. And, I did a lot of advertising photography for a long time, editorial, and then I got a phone call from a client that asked me to photograph a celebrity for a sports network here. And I did that one, and it turned out great. And it interested me. I knew there was a lot of things that went along with taking a picture of somebody famous as opposed to somebody on the street. And wasn't really sure if I wanted to go down this road, but I kept doing the work. And as a friend of mine said, once you get one, you get more. Once you get more, you keep getting more. So it really started kind of slowly, and I just built a portfolio with, just people that I wanted to work with.
How did it work back then? Just to give our viewers and listeners sort of an impression, because now we live in a world of social media where, everybody puts all their stuff on like Instagram or whatever the latest platform is. But back in those days, how did that work? You put together a portfolio, and then would you go through an agent, or how would that physically actually work?
Well, before social media took off, essentially what we did was we had a portfolio. You remember, they either had a handle on it or it was essentially a beautiful book of prints. And you would make appointments with creative directors, art directors, and go in and do it the old-fashioned way. Show your work, hopefully have a good rapport with the person you're working with, and quote-unquote beg them for a job. And since social media happened and, the internet, sadly, those kinds of meetings are harder, if not impossible to get. So you really rely on doing instead of a portfolio that you take around, now you do a virtual portfolio, which is your website. I still believe the best relationships are people. And your rapport with whoever you're working with. People want to feel like they like who they're working with, they know who they're working with. So even social media and the way that digital has changed our business, my best relationships or clients are still ones that I can jump on the phone with and they know I'm going to come through for them.
That's one of the things I think that's an important lesson, especially for the younger generation to learn, is that actually, regardless of what we think is like the latest social media platform, behind that, there's always people. The people who make the buying decisions ultimately are still people, and building these relationships is possibly an art form that I sometimes feel, especially with the younger generation, is almost like it's turning to a lost art form, being able to make those personal or create those personal relationships.
I had a great college professor, an old cantankerous guy that I talk about all the time, even to this day. And I remember him saying, photography, the business of photography is 10% taking pictures and the other 90% solving problems, putting out fires, going after clients. And it is so true. You have to be able to do that other 90%. I know a lot of great photographers who are brilliant and are not doing as well as they should because they're not interested in people relationships. They're not interested in getting out there and shaking hands and kind of doing it the old-fashioned way. And at the end of the day, like you said, we're still people. and we want to communicate and have relationships with each other. So it's important that especially the younger people remember that,
It really amuses me every time because I have younger kids. Well, my youngest kid is 13. The two older ones are 20 and 22. But the interesting thing is that the 20 and the 22-year-olds had a really hard time understanding that sometimes it's really necessary to pick up the phone and to talk to somebody, rather than relying on sending them a message on whatever messaging app that they were thinking about, down to the point where it almost felt like, like simple things like booking a doctor's appointment, for example. I remember my stepdaughter going, "Oh, but I've texted them and I haven't had a reply." I was like, "Well, have you thought about picking up the phone and actually talking to them?" Oh no.
I hear you loud and clear. I know exactly what you mean.
It's unbelievable. That's also, I always say to people, like things like the photography show or Imaging USA, or, these shows are great for photographers, not really, from my perspective, not because of all the latest and greatest gear that's there, but actually because of all the connections you can make there, the personal relationships you can forge and the people you can meet in places like that.
I agree with you 100%. I still, at the end of the day, just like in music, which I'm a huge fan, I'm a musician myself, a good song is a good song. So you can be the best people person in the world, and if your photographs aren't very good, you're not going to go very far. Whereas if you make a beautiful image, you're going to eventually get there, but you're either going to need an agent to do all of that people work for you. And so there's a lot of different ways. There's no direct route to go from point A to point B. I wish I knew it. I'm still trying to navigate it today. But at the end of the day, if your photography is great, you're going to get there.
And there you have it, folks. The Best of Camera Shake podcast 2024. What an absolutely epic year it's been. Packed with memorable conversations, inspiring insights, and moments that made us laugh, think, and sometimes even tear up. Looking back at these highlights, I'm reminded just how lucky I am to share this space with such talented guests, and with you, our incredible listeners and viewers. Every comment, every share, every download, it all means the world. And it's what keeps the show going strong. But here's the twist. As we close out 2024, I'm not just looking back, I'm looking forward. Next year is shaping up to be even bigger, even bolder, and I can't wait to take you along for the ride because for next week's episode, I've asked some of the leading names in photography to tell me what they think is going to be big in 2025. Make sure you tune in for that. So, whether you're a seasoned pro, a weekend hobbyist, or someone who just stumbled upon this podcast while scrolling through YouTube, thank you. Thank you for being part of this journey, for sharing your time with me, and for keeping the spirit of photography alive and kicking. As we step into 2025, remember this. Every click of the shutter tells a story. Every moment captured is a memory preserved. And every day is a chance to see the world through a new lens. Until then, keep chasing your light, keep telling your stories, and most importantly, keep showing up. This is me, Kirsten Lutz, signing off from the Camera Shake podcast for 2024. Now, I can't wait to see some of you in person at Imaging USA in Dallas and at the photography show in London. So, make sure you come by and say hello. So with that, I wish you a brilliant end to the year and an even brighter start to the next one. Take care, stay inspired, and I'll see you back here next Thursday in 2025.